All right, folks. The questions arise. Will Big Brother survive? What will become of the tick like slugs? All of that and more on this premiere episode of Game Over, the Alien Earth podcast. Stay tuned. All right. Good evening to those of you on the East Coast. Good afternoon to those of you on the West Coast. Welcome to, as I said, this premiere episode of Game Over, the Alien Earth podcast, the show in which we, whether it's myself or the guest host that I have each week, join in dissecting, the current episode that we are covering in a given week on this show. I'm your host, Brandon Troy, and the subject of this week's show will be episodes 1 and 2, which is Neverland and Mr. October, respectively. Just to give you guys a quick rundown of how these breakdowns work. Of course, I'm going to jump into a really brief a recap of this episodes, and then after that, I will introduce our guests each week, and me and the guests will go over some analysis of the episode, some themes that seem to arise within those given episodes, and then also go into some theories of some things that we, believe might be coming down the road. So, as always, if you guys are watching this episode live, thank you guys so much. But if you're catching the episode after the fact, just know that I will be doing the timestamps as needed. So that way, once you're watching this episode afterwards, you're able to skip forward or backwards to whichever part of the show you so choose. So just keep that in mind. But without further ado, I want to be able to dive into our recap. And of course, spoilers are ahead. So let me bring that up now. All right, so see if I can get our friend up here. Here we go. So we begin the episode 1, with some exposition about the arms race that is currently happening among the different forms that exists in the current setting of the series, that being cyborgs who are cybernetically enhanced humans. We have our synths, artificially intelligent beings. And then lastly, the new wrinkle that we have with this series, our hybrids, which are artificial beings downloaded with human consciousness. Next, we're introduced to the Maginot crew, a crew reminiscent of the Nostromo. The year, we understand, is 2021, and as the Maginot crew are on course to return home to Earth after a 65-year-long mission, with a collection of mysterious confined creatures that are in tow. In the crew's conversation, we're provided further exposition about the corporate players in the series. We have Weyland-Yutani, who controls North and South America, as well as Mars and Saturn. One of the other corporations we learn is Dynamic, who controls the moon. Unfortunately, he did not give us an indication of or representation of their logo. So the most that we know about this organization is that they control the moon. Along with these other corporations, we do have a new kid on the block known as Prodigy, which is led by Boy Cavalier, which specializes in synths as well as AI. Meanwhile, back on Earth, we have Boy Cavalier sitting here and his prodigy staff successfully create the first hybrid from the mind of a deathly ill girl. However, despite the procedure's success, there are still kinks adjusting to an adult body, regulating emotions since there aren't any hormones that are brought about in this new body that would normally be the case with a regular human being. Soon enough, our hybrid, known as Wendy, seen here, acts as a surrogate big sister and mentor for additional test subjects, also sickly kids who are made into hybrids. And then we cut back to the Maginot as chaos has erupted, as the specimens mentioned earlier have somehow escaped from confinement and have wreaked havoc on the ship. Among the chaos, the cyborg Morrow is seen sabotaging seemingly the last surviving crew member's efforts to survive the onslaught, as he too also escapes a xenomorph's clutches and emergency stasis pod. Next, we're introduced to New Siam, a prodigal city, and along with that, we're introduced to one of its residents, Joe DiMaggio, aka Hermit, a medic working for Prodigy, who is revealed to be Wendy's biological brother. Shortly after his introduction, the Maginot makes its arrival, crash landing in the city, and it is at this moment that it's revealed that Hermit is a part of a search and rescue tactical unit who, as luck would have it, of course, head into the crash ship to assist with any survivors. It is in doing so that the unit bears witness to the destructive aftermath wreaked by the escaped specimens, which include our sole cyborg survivor in the form of Morrow, as well as some unexpected encounters with the dangerous specimens that have been set loose. Wendy, concerned for her brother's well-being, takes the initiative to go secure the cargo from the crashed Maginot ship in the hopes of also rescuing her brother, and that ends up closing episode 1. Episode 2 opens with Hermit and his group continuing to investigate the Maginot with an entity unbeknownst to him in pursuit. And back at the Neverland facility, Dame and Cavalier have a discussion regarding the concept of humanity, man versus machine, the intellectual dominance that man is still trying to secure in the current landscape that they, currently exist in. So, they're having a philosophical conversation of sorts. Meanwhile, at the Maginot crash site, our pursuer soon makes itself known to Hermit and company, targeting Hermit specifically. And it is during this sequence that we're provided insight on Joe, aka Hermit's intention to leave his rescue unit to go to medical school, as well as getting further insight into Wendy's unusual abilities. Wendy and her fellow hybrids, aka the Lost Boys, skipping ahead here, aka the Lost Boys, along with Kirsch acting as a chaperone, finally arrive at the crash site, and it is in utilizing her abilities with the surveillance equipment, Wendy is able to pinpoint her brother's location. Elsewhere, Cavalier finds himself in an entanglement with his corporate rival, Yutani, over the contents of the crashed ship, and it's in retracing the steps of the rescue unit that Wendy and Slightly, along with Kirsch and the other Lost Boys, pursue their respective objectives, surveying the Maginot, and in doing so, Kirsch and the Lost Boys soon come upon a plant-like creature and more gruesome surprises. While Herman's encounter with the xenomorph comes to a head as he is unexpectedly spared by Morrow, who captures it. However, this is all for naught, as the creature does eventually escape his clutches. Soon enough, Wendy, with Slightly in tow, reunites with her brother, and it's eventually revealed to him that Wendy, this hybrid, is in fact his sister, who he had long thought to be dead. However, Wendy is placed on a little side mission on behalf of Kirsch to secure some of the specimens that are still on the ship, and in doing so, endangers, her brother, Hermit, which leaves us on a cliffhanger, which brings us to our credits for this week, following the first 2 episodes of Alien Earth. So, with that being said, I want to do a quick introduction with our guest host. Just had him with us last week, and I'm happy to have him back with us. Again, carries a multitude of hats, whether we're talking as a writer, as a producer, and as a filmmaker. He's also a geek pundit, like myself, as the host of the BURNETTWORK. It is my pleasure to welcome back this week Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Let me bring him on.
Hello there. It's great to be here. Thank you. Thanks for having me yet again to talk about the show.
For sure. I feel like I would be remiss not to bring you on, Robert, and talk about Aliens. So just initial impressions. Can you just let me know what were your thoughts on the episode? I shared with you that I did have an opportunity to see the first episode because they premiered it at Comic-Con, but I didn't have a chance to see episode 2. But I'm going to hand you the floor. Just initial impressions.
I enjoyed the series. I really did. I thought it was really interesting. I thought it had some compelling science fiction elements, but then I was kind of confused after I watched it. As I do, I go online and find interviews with the creators. And I was reading an interview with Noah Hawley, who said he wasn't particularly interested in the canon of the Alien franchise. Now I can understand that because even the movies, once we got to Alien versus Predator, canon kind of went out the window. With their Antarctic pyramid and all that business. And then, of course, I've read so many Dark Horse Alien comics, a lot of which are quite good. And so, and this obviously, I don't think this is just an Alien series, but it also has a lot of Blade Runner in it. And a lot of which I liked. I mean, I respected that. So I found the show interesting, and I was fascinated by what they were doing with it. It had a lot of really interesting science fiction concepts, and I like the idea. I mean, one of the things, I saw Alien in the theater first run, and it's hard to explain to people, I say this a lot on my show, what it was like to see movies like Alien and Star Wars and Superman and Close Encounters and Raiders in the theater for the first time, because there really hadn't been anything ever like that. I mean, to have seen Alien in the theater, I saw it in 70 millimeter in this giant theater, beautiful theater, where I had seen Star Wars and Empire and Jedi later, obviously. But when I saw it in 79, I mean, it was awe-inspiring. It was you can't imagine. There was nothing. People talk about how it was inspired by Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires, or it came from beyond space. I mean, not it came from beyond space, but it came from beyond space. And yeah, that's true. It was inspired by those things, but it had cinematically, to see Alien was shocking. I mean, it was so mind-blowing to see the way this alien creature and the fact that, I always use the word verisimilitude, but it had peak verisimilitude. It felt like you were almost watching a docudrama, like you're there. Like, and these characters, the idea that they basically put these blue collar, they were truck drivers, they were oil rig workers, and they were workaday people, and to set them, and there was an effort made to make them incredibly believable human beings. They weren't the characters of Star Trek. They were not from the 99th percentile of greatness out on the edge of the final frontier. These were normal people confronting basically a Lovecraftian horror that was beyond their understanding, but they did the best they could with what they had, even though there was no chance that they could have fought this thing, because they had no one had ever seen anything like it. But one of the things that I found most interesting about Alien, and having seen it 100 times since then, is it was clear that Weyland-Yutani, the company, knew that there were aliens on LV-426.
Yes.
Because there was a mission. Ash had a mission. Ash, they replaced the science officer with Ash right before they shipped out. I'm sure that they were redirected to that because obviously the Maginot had been there before. They had picked up, and the fact that there was a ship whose specific purpose was to travel the universe and find the most horrific examples of alien life possible and bring them back to Earth, to weaponize them, to use them, I always thought was a good idea. But in Alien, that was sort of a side story when Ash reveals that he's going to take you all out, and they didn't know Ash was a synth or a robot, an android.
That reveal, yeah, for sure. But I was going to say, go ahead.
Well, it was Ash is a goddamn robot. I mean, it was really great, and it added a layer to Alien that was a world building layer a world building layer of it, where because you never saw Weyland-Yutani, you didn't know what was going on, but you knew it was a corporate action. Those corporations, they just care about money and profit, and it was all there in the movie. When Ash says it's a perfect organism, you have my sympathies. He already knows all you need to know about the xenomorph. And I always found that really interesting, because they never picked up on aliens when there's a colony on LV-426. Suddenly they forget, but then you realize it was probably a secret that was covered up or something. I don't know. And the fact, look, I never really bought the idea in Aliens that they didn't find a huge derelict spaceship that was in a drive, I don't know how long, a day away from where the colony was built, and they were on that planet for 57 years and no one found that. They didn't do any kind of surveying, find it gigantic, because that signal was still broadcasting. That's like nobody turned off that signal. So I always thought that was a problem.
So I was going to say, I'm glad you brought that up, and just to kind of rewind over everything that you said is there is something to be said about that, about those films that are just so iconic, and even you remember it just like yesterday, what that feeling was of seeing those films the first time. I mean, we're on what number now in Jurassic Park, but I was a kid and I went to the theaters to see the very first Jurassic Park, and I will never forget that experience of those sequences in Jurassic Park. And
another game changer.
So or Blade,
Jurassic Park was a total game changer.
In Blade, that was another one, incredible, where no one expected what was going to happen to go down, and the reaction out of the audience. That's what makes the theater going experience so magical and so awesome, which I'm so passionate about, and hopefully we can protect that, even though we're living in this day and age of streaming. So
here's the thing. I really appreciate what Noah Hawley was doing with this, in the sense that, the idea that we're looking for immortality. I mean, I don't think people really have an understanding of where AI is going to take us. Because if we had bodies like that, and obviously there's a great Star Trek episode from the first season of Star Trek called they've referred to it on Strange New Worlds, What Are Little Girls Made Of, where a doctor has using old ancient technology to make android bodies that we can live in. Because, until humanity can escape our, let's call it an 80-year lifespan, we're not going to truly change. And the idea that if we could download our consciousness into a synthetic body, man, sign me up. If I could live for thousands of years, as long as, I could still enjoy a woman's touch, things like that. If I could live for 1,000 years, I would do it. Like I having a synthetic body. I mean, I would prefer the synthetic body the Borg Queen could provide me, where skin works. If someone blows on my skin, that's what I want. And if the synthetic women are fully functional, if you know what I'm saying, I'm all good. But until we can do that, and I think by the end of the 21st century, there's probably a good bet we could.
Oh, we're somehow. There. We're there. Going to CES the last couple of years. We're just about there.
So I really like this idea that the show began with that these major corporations that were controlling the world were now vying to essentially create immortality.
For sure.
And I love the idea that I love that conversation that he has. That that what's his name? Not Ryland. Kirsch. Coincidentally, the same name as the character with the shocking white hair in David Cronenberg's new movie, Kirsch. That Vincent Cassel plays. But when Kirsch gives this story about being, it tells the tale of being meat.
Yes,
how human beings.
that was a great speech. Yeah,
and I love the idea that our synthetic bodies make us no longer meat. Like an alien. I mean, we've seen the aliens destroy Bishop in Aliens, but I don't think particularly we're sort of immune to alien pathogens if we were in these synthetic bodies.
Right.
So there's always the question of what the alien, I think, represents is it's so violent. I mean, in every way to human life. It's so virulently dangerous to us, whether it's implanting us with embryos, whether it's dropping acid for blood on us or just tearing us apart with its tail. And it unfortunately in the original Alien, it represented sort of a Lovecraftian unknowability of the cosmos. Yeah. Like we were never going to know where that alien space jockey came from. We were never going to know, nor should we have ever known where that ship. I know that storytellers are like, the obvious thing is where did that derelict spaceship come? We need to know the space jockey's backstory. No, we don't, because it's proven it was never going to be as interesting as not knowing. You know, sure. and the fact that mankind was confronted by one of the old ones, as Lovecraft would call them, was great. And then, of course, as we are wont to do with a lot of our IPs, we have to go and explain everything. Yeah. And the explaining doesn't usually go well, because it completely diminishes the more you explain the alien, the more it's like, oh, it's just it's not as unstoppable as it. We can stop it now. We can send in the Space Marines but I did think that the show, both episodes, were full of intriguing ideas. And I
was going to say, I want to be able to get into that, but before we do that, I want to, because all the things that you talked about, play into some of the themes that that seem to be prevalent with this episode. And the first one that I wanted to kind of get into, dive in with you with, is humanity versus logic, because we seem to kind of have these two sides, and we had that represented with Dame on one end, who was kind of like that maternal figure for Wendy, and then on the other end you had that cold logic that we had that was coming from Kirsch. And so I love to dive into that idea with you, because you have that idea of Dame, who, despite the circumstances that would otherwise say that Wendy is no longer human, she's trying to have every trying to place in every effort that she possibly can to maintain that humanity. And just like you said, with that conversation that Kirsch had of talking about human beings fighting that eventuality of being something's prey or being meat, just kind of playing against those two different concepts.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing about Wendy is she's still human. I mean, just because her body is synthetic and she has basically superpowers now, which I've always thought was interesting that they make. I mean, a human body, even if you're built out of steel, if you're jumping off the side of mountains down onto the beach, that's a lot to ask. I mean, I get it. And we've had that before. Data, there's been so many androids that want to be human, but if you're a human being that's already been put into a synthetic body, you still have the mindset of a human being. Your mind isn't necessarily changed at all. You're not going to suddenly think differently because you're in a synthetic body, unless you want to get into, like, you're going to learn something like, oh, I'm much more powerful than I was before. And I'm never going to get a tummy ache when I eat bad food, or I'm not. It's a weird thing, because I always feel that a lot of these ideas are kind of half baked. Like they think, okay, we've now put you into an android body.
Right.
Well, if you're still a human being, if your thought process, it's not like the way you think is going to suddenly change because, I mean, I'm not aware that my brain is organic. I'm just thinking. I'm just like, however I'm thinking. I'm not sitting there going, "Ooh, I can feel my brain, my consciousness I can feel the electronic impulses that are going through my senses right now." Seeing you, you're not aware of that, and it wouldn't matter if you're in a cybernetic body or if you're in a biological body. It doesn't change the way you think unless somehow it did. But then again, if you would get tripped up in the narrative if you were going to get into that, you just have to go with it. And I understand that, because we are also have the whole history of how androids and cyborgs and they've all been portrayed in our previous movies. So every creator who deals with this, a lot of it, you got to say Blade Runner is pretty much the ultimate.
Sure.
Maybe Blade Runner, a little Metropolis, and maybe the ballet Coppelia. But when you talk about, and obviously Pinocchio, I want to be a real boy, that you can't get away from that. And so everything is sort of informed by those stories, so we can see, and especially you can't do Alien without thinking about Ridley Scott, which brings you to Blade Runner. So to combine these things together, I thought was pretty inspired. I mean, I liked it all, and I liked seeing where it's going to go. But at the end of the day, here's what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for, where is this story going to take us? Like and also, okay, you've intentionally created this gigantic disaster by crashing this monstrously huge ship. Like, I've always had a problem with that. I had a problem with it in Star Trek Into Darkness. I had a problem with it in the first episode of Gundam, where a side crashes into Australia or whatever. These gigantic, or a Star Destroyer crashing on the Executor, crashing on the surface of the Death Star, because the kind of damage something like that would cause is so massive that it's like, how do you recover from that? But you go with it anyway. How would any of those specimens survive such a crash? Especially because they've been let out. Like, they don't know they're about to crash. So how they just all survive because they're that smart?
Yeah.
It's I always, but again, I shouldn't think that way. You just kind of have to go with it on shows.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna give a shout out down here, Rob, because I absolutely understand where you're coming from, but I'm gonna go with our viewer here, Bath Time, in that the only caveat to that kind of provides a new wrinkle that I appreciate that they did, is providing that biological piece of how those hormones can also shape, some of our behaviors too, because without them, what does that make us? Because a lot of those things that innately help us, have that amount of humanity, if we don't have them, then what are we at that point? Don't have it. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was speaking about intellect.
Gotcha.
They bring it up because that whole conversation about meat is that we're no longer meat. We're not organic, so no one's going to want to eat us.
Right.
And yes, we don't have to have fear. And that's the kind of thing, that's the whole point of that, is that we are never going to be meat again, which is one of the reasons. But yes, the things being in those bodies for an extended period of time would start to change our humanity, because we're not human anymore. But the way we process logic and the things that we think about, if we're not getting those, but maybe not. Like, I don't know when I'm getting a dose of serotonin, or do I? Like, right. and I think it would be interesting. But yeah, you don't have to fear being infected by some alien life form, because there's nothing to infect. There's no biology. But that's another thing. Then I start going, aside from the fact that these are vicious creatures, the idea that the alien, the xenomorph, is one thing, but the eyeball creature and the plant life, why would everything in the universe want to be attracted to us? Our biology would be so, like, who knows if we would taste good to them,
right?
And I feel like it's kind of weird to think that, okay, we're going to go to these planets that have entirely different ecosystems than ours. They might they're just assuming that all the planets in the universe that have life are just like Earth, and that probably wouldn't be true at all. So these horrible alien life forms might just die in our, like, who says they breathe oxygen?
True.
So
But I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because that goes into the other theme that seemed to arise out of these two episodes. Because for all intents and purposes, for me, since they released both of these episodes, I'm gonna think of it just as a 2-hour movie versus them being separate.
Sure.
And if we're
Yeah.
talking about the theme outside of that idea of logic versus humanity, is the idea of predator versus prey, because you touched on a couple of examples of that. And just the question, the speech that Kirsch has. I mean, he has so many great lines in this between these two episodes. Another favorite of mine is when he says, "Fears for animals, you're not animals, now move." It was a really awesome line. But just that idea that they pose, which is fascinating, they pose the idea that while it may seem obvious that the aliens would be predators, under the right circumstances, they would also be prey too, because we have that example that we saw with the scorpion, where the scorpion is confined, and just as the way the scorpion is confined, we have these aliens that are confined. Who knows? The aliens, just as you said, if they're not used to this environment and they're trying to defend themselves, they could have very well been at peace where they were, and we snatched them and grabbed them and are bringing them into a place or an environment that they are not accustomed to, hence making them into prey. And then those roles obviously switch once they are freed. But just that idea that is posed of how the creatures, no matter how scary or devastating a lot of the things they can do, they're still, at the end of the day, animals. They're still creatures, and they can also be victims as well. So that I am fascinating how far they're going to take that going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder in terms of, is anyone going to know? Like, here's the thing: are they going to keep a lid on this? Is word of the alien xenomorph and all these other creatures going to get out to the world at large? Are they going to put a lid on it? Is it going to become clamped down on? Because every time they bring something, like they did this with Alien versus Predator, every time they bring the aliens to Earth, they make them more ordinary. And I look, I understand that. Yeah, and it's I always feel that with the aliens, like, the aliens are just going to alien. They don't know what they're doing. Like, we're just what we do. And what Prometheus and what Alien Covenant did was demystify all that even further. Like, oh, David was messing around with the engineer's black goo. I mean, it all, by offering all that stuff up, it did not, it just made it all too ordinary and mundane to me.
Yeah.
And I feel like Noah Hawley, by saying, well, I'm not really working within the confines of Alien. And I'm like, yes, you are. You've decided to set this show 2 years before Alien. Like, you've got Mother. You recreated the Mother set exactly. Like, you can't, all the corridors of the Maginot look just like the Nostromo. And it's such a weird thing. Like, I'm really growing tired, though. Like, as much as I thought this was an interesting science fiction show, I kind of wish it wasn't Alien. I mean, I know it had to be Alien, but they could have done all of this stuff without a xenomorph. They could have said, okay, they're gathering the worst of the worst throughout the galaxy, and they're bringing it back, and Earth has been divided up by these corporations, which I can totally believe actually happened. But the thing is, by doing this, then everybody watching, and let's face it,
comes with baggage. It's going to come with baggage.
Nobody's watching this show going, I've never seen Alien before. Oh, let's check this out. It's like Alien has been around for almost 50 years.
Yeah.
And so I feel when you're dealing with these IPs, we didn't ask you to set something within a continuity. You chose to do it. And so by doing that, you've created
territory.
Yeah, you've created, and everybody's like, well, I don't why is continuity important? I don't believe in canon. I'm like, well, okay, but you decided to use, it's called Alien Earth. The very life cycle of a xenomorph has been very well established since 1979, and you chose that. And then James Cameron came and moved that around because he posited that there was a queen that was laying those eggs.
Right.
You know, and of course, if you watch the deleted scenes in Alien or the director's cut of Alien, you see that the eggs are forming around
from the person.
Yeah, which was, I'm glad they cut that out, because I liked it better when I hadn't seen those deleted scenes, and you know, I saw those on the Laserdisc first after Aliens had come out. But I mean, it's a weird thing. Like, I'm watching the show, I like all of this, I like the actors, I like what's going on, I'm very fascinated by it, and I think it's really well done. But I always come back to, why did you choose? We now have Alien Romulus, which I wasn't a particular fan of. You know, I was like, okay, you're basically giving us Alien's greatest hits.
Yeah, I remember your hilarious your hilarious rant on that.
But, I mean, it was well done.
Yeah,
but I'm like, you know, James Cameron added a wrinkle, like taking a haunted house in space movie and then turning it into a allegory for Vietnam. You know, when these very well-equipped Marines go into a place that they're unequipped to deal with. I love that. And that was something new. And even Alien 3, for all of its faults, the assembly cut of Alien 3 is really interesting, because you've got these convicts that become space monks and all that. And then even Alien Resurrection, which is kind of goofy and too French and all that, but it still has, you know, this.
I have a soft spot for Resurrection, and I know it's flawed, but yeah, it's fun. It's definitely fun.
It is, and it's got, you know, clone Sigourney Weaver, but what's more interesting to me is no one has really seized. They kind of tried to do this in Prometheus, but by doing it with David, with a crazy paranoid android, you know, by turning the android evil, that was just so sort of tropey and all that. I would be much more interested if, like, what if the aliens were sort of, and not to get religious or spiritual, but what if the aliens were God's way of pruning the universe? You know, like the xenomorphs were created to test those who came across them.
Sure.
You know, or something like that. Like these vicious creatures, if you're not strong enough to survive them, this is how the universe keeps, you know, life forms, intelligent life that doesn't necessarily deserve to progress. You come across the xenomorphs and they will cull you from the universe, or something like that. You know, I always thought there could be something really, and a lot of the Dark Horse comics got into stuff like that, and it was interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Now I'm glad. I feel like you provide perfect segues, sir. So I'm gonna go into our theories. I feel like that's a perfect time to do so. And one of the things that I feel like is like an MVP of of between these two episodes is the T.S. Ellis, of course, and based on what it is capable of doing, I do have a theory, and I want to know your thoughts on this. The over under 50 that it will survive by season's end, because I mean, based on like what we know about this creature and what it's capable of, being able to infiltrate, I feel like that is too good of an opportunity to pass up, to not leave on a season cliffhanger.
Oh, I agree with you. Yeah, I think you're right.
Even if it ends up somehow infiltrating one of these corporations somehow, with one of the executive members.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something that could happen.
So, but even outside of that, speaking of corporations, it was explained that there were five corporations in total that we have within this world of Alien Earth, and within the two episodes that we have, we only got exposed to. We were made known of three, but we only got exposed to two of them. What are your thoughts on if we'll see the remaining three over the season, or if they will confine it just between that conflict between Yutani and Prodigy?
I don't know. I think they're probably going to keep it just between them. I mean, they might bring the other things in, but I think it just gets too much. I don't know. It's only 8 episodes.
Yeah.
So we've only got 6 left.
Right.
You know, I think there's enough now that they've set up a lot of really interesting stuff happening. Like, I would assume that there's a reason why the ship was sabotaged, you know, and these aliens were brought back to Earth for a purpose.
Yeah.
You know, and I want to know, was it just a cyborg? Was he just mad at people? Like, you know what? It seems to me too that crashing spaceships is not the most effective way to let these, because you no longer have a controlled. Did you just want to unleash these life forms on the human population where you just, it's like crashing a plane and killing the people? Was this your World Trade Center moment? Sure. You know, you just want these things to go out and run amok. I mean, why then land on an island? Why not crash your ship on the mainland somewhere? But I don't know.
And I was going to ask too, with two of our characters, because when it comes to Alien, they just have a knack or a habit of foreshadowing a lot of things. Do we feel that something is going to become of Dame and Arthur, based on their inability to have kids? Like, I feel like they provided enough attention to the fact that that they are trying to have kids, that there is something to that, where they may be foreshadowing something may happen to Dame or something may happen to Arthur.
I think absolutely.
So,
plus, this is a movie, you know, the Alien franchise is one where they take characters that you like and eviscerate them.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, because I was
bad.
like, oh, okay, you must be foreshadowing that we're going to have some type of insane related pregnancy or regarding involving one of those two in some type of way, since they are 100%. So hard pressed to have kids. You want to have kids? Great. Here you go.
Here's your offspring.
Just in the same way, kind of similar to what we had with, you know, you were just mentioning Prometheus a moment ago, where we had a similar situation there. There where,
I mean, obviously pregnancy and birth is a big deal in the Alien franchise, you know. And look what happened. What happens to the first person when you see what happens to Kane? He becomes essentially the first mother of an alien. You know, and there is no gender. It doesn't matter. You're screwed no matter what.
Right.
And of course we see Elizabeth Salander, the girl with the dragon tattoo, Noomi Rapace in Prometheus has an alien baby too. You know, and it's interesting. I mean, yeah, it'll I'm curious to see where all this is going to go. Yeah.
So I want to get your thoughts on this, because they keep going back and forth, and it is actually related to one of the questions that were posed in the chat, and talking about what specifically do we perceive is the ability that Wendy herself has. You know, do we believe that it is a form of her being a technopath? Do we believe that she, you know, is psychic? Whether she's an empath? Like, what are your thoughts on that, of what the teases that they're providing to us?
I don't really know, because again, if you put human consciousness into a synthetic body, you know, they can tell us what that body can do. But I think, again, I want to make sure that they are playing, that there are rules now. Like, and the idea that she has these gifts, or suddenly has been given these superhuman powers of some kind, seems a little disingenuous. I mean, look, strength is one thing. You can believe that a synthetic body can be stronger. It's more resilient. You can't get bitten in half by a shark or something, but to then suddenly say that unless the body is designed with some kind of powers that it would have, whether there was human consciousness in it or not, you know, I don't know where they're going to go with that. I'm really interested to see, though, because again, when you're creating a new thing, and my whole thing, whenever you're in science fiction, fantasy, and horror, I always say, look, you get one big ask in your premise, you know, and we'll buy into it. But if you have too many asks, then we won't buy into it anymore.
Lose it. Yeah.
Yeah. And if suddenly, you know, synths have all these abilities that come out of kind of nowhere, that becomes problematic. And you have to understand, like, okay, there's cyborgs, there's humans that are enhanced. There's androids, synthetics, and then there's hybrids. And so simply because human consciousness is put into a machine brain, does that mean you could be psychic?
Right.
I mean, does it mean you
could be? Did she have it before, and it just transferred? Well, yeah. You know, when she became the hybrid, did she always?
But see that? Yeah, but that's the thing. So you're talking about an operating system, because if you can be psychic, and does that mean you need a biological operating system, which is our brains essentially? And if you're conscious, because nobody wants to get into this, because then there's too much you have to think about. You know, it gets too much. So, yeah. So it'll be interesting. I mean, look, I believe your senses can be jacked up because your ears, your sight, if you're that can all be true, you know, but mental power is different.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, you gave an impression, your impressions before, and I felt this would be fun here. I feel like you'd appreciate this. So, you know, I'm going to what we thought as our review of keeping up with the Joneses, if you will. If you would give the number of Jonesy cats, where would you place, you know, I guess, as I said, for me, you know, maybe you want to separate each episode, but, you know, for me, I would pair.
No, I think of it as a whole. I think the show has to be reviewed as a whole. Okay. You know, I mean, I think the first 2 episodes were kind of, I mean, I'd probably give this an 8.
Okay.
You know, because it held my interest. I'm fascinated to see where it goes. There's a lot of really interesting ideas in it. And I was really entertained by it. I was like, this is there. Noah Hawley look, I love what he did with Fargo. I love what he did with Legion. I think what he's doing with all these concepts are really interesting and definitely worth my time. So I'm going to give it an 8.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, I'm gonna be I'm gonna be slightly harsh, and I'll tell you why. And you may also appreciate this because it's somewhat similar. I know you had mentioned your issues with Alien Romulus. I'll start first with issue that I had even prior with a whole separate other show, but we're coming across it again with this show, and it's the flash forwards. I feel like the Alien franchise is dense enough that it's, you know, that there's enough there, especially with the creatures and all the other wrinkles that we
hated them in this show,
that we did not need this transition.
I hated
it. It was unnecessary.
I hated it.
Again, stop with the flash forwards.
I mean, they're so weird, that edit. Why are you doing this? I mean, is this something that young whippersnapper editors who've been making TikTok videos before they get jobs on TV shows are doing? I really, you know what? It shows, to me, it shows a lack of faith in your material, because when you're editing something, as a film editor myself, by doing quick cuts like that, to me, you are forcing something. You know, because you're watching something. If you edit fast, you're forcing people to reorient themselves and to watch these different images. Yeah, and to me, it's a trick. You know, it's not earned. It's like if you play a piece. It's like if somebody puts an air horn behind you, and you know you're startled by it. You're never going to not be startled by it. But when you know that there's somebody with an air horn behind you, and they've done it more than once, you're just going, "Why are you doing that still?" You know, It worked once, but now you're doing it over and over again, and it seems like a cheap shot, because it is a cheap shot.
And I guess the other one that I will bring up to you, Rob, is, and I feel like this picture best represents this, so bear with me, are dumb characters. Like, we're in the world of aliens, and we, again, you know, with our character, Hermit here, you know, we come under the understanding that he is a medic. So if he is a medic, he would have an idea of diseases and other things, you know, that are dangerous to the human body. He's placing his face up to this egg that he has no idea what it is.
Dude.
He's coming into all of these environments. He has no mask. None of the characters have masks. They're a search and rescue team. And I mean, when we're talking about like the just the idea of like a building being destroyed, there are health related matters that come with that, asbestos, any of these other, things that could be issues that you would want to have some type of protection, mask, something. And I didn't feel like they had enough. They just walked in there,
Dude.
And just hoped, that they were, good to go. And this is again becoming, and as much as I love Aliens, I love the franchise, I love the IP, it's still something that needs to be addressed, where we have these characters that are in the medical field, yet they still keep making dumb decisions, placing them in these circumstances where they're making dumb decisions. And I'm like, someone in the medical field would not do that at all.
No. And it's driven me crazy since Prometheus.
And I was gonna say, to your point,
cobra-headed alien I've never seen before.
But I was saying, to your point, like it seems like they're kind of making a correction with it based off of what is being teased ahead of having, the hybrids dissect and to analyze these creatures, which I think, if I remember correctly, you brought up that idea. So I don't know if they heard you, is that idea of finally having, why can't we just have all androids? They're not going to be, or characters that, are not biological. So that way, they're able to study these creatures. It looks like they're trying to go that way.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you could have, come on, at least with the human characters, like, please, like have them, make decisions that make sense. And even to the point of Romulus, which is what I appreciated about Romulus in comparison with other Alien films, at least we understand that those characters, they're younger characters, they're not in that same field, they don't know what they're getting themselves into.
No,
they're
they don't.
over their heads. So we come to understand and we accept the circumstances that they're placed in. But in other Alien films, we've had all of these medics, surgeons, all of these folks that are in the medical field, and they keep like making the same errors. And I'm like, you have an alien species, as you said, that's virulent, that is, absolute biological disaster to human beings, and yet, like, we are not making the necessary precautions to protect ourselves from that. That we have control over. So
yeah, it's frustrating. and I feel like these we've seen this stuff happen, and this is a recognized failing of the universe, and they keep delving into it. And it's like, come on, man. Anyone knows, like, you've watched any other movie, there's biological quarantines. They quarantine everything. Like, we're not. It's funny, Timothy Olyphant also starred in a movie, a remake of George Romero's The Crazies. I wrote an article for it for the Lionsgate website recently. And The Crazies, I think, is the remake of it. It's really, really good, because Timothy Olyphant figures out what's going on, and the characters in the movie are really smart. And Timothy Olyphant plays the hero sheriff, and he's like, something's going on here. And every decision that he makes, for the most part, the characters are really smart, and it makes the movie a joy to watch, because even though they're smart, things get worse and worse and worse.
Sure.
And that makes the movie, it gives it credibility, so you're much more involved. But when you watch these stupid human characters, like, well, here's an alien egg, and you're like, what's in the first Alien? It makes sense, because these guys are blue collar workers. A thing opens up like this, and it goes, I'm gonna go look inside. What is it? And that was horrifying, because we, the audience, were like, don't do that.
Right.
We're the audience, and we're like, when I was watching Alien the first time, I knew that was a bad idea. I'm like 11 years old, and I'm like, don't do that. Don't stick your head in there. Please don't do that. Don't do that. I'm like 11 in the theater going, Kane, don't do that. And he's, I can't wait. I mean, if you see something that looks like a leather egg that opens up like that, it's a good bet you should go the other way as fast as possible.
Yeah.
But in that movie, they set it up, so why would they know? They're like blue collar oil rig workers. They don't know.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. At least establish the circumstances that makes it, that we can buy it. But if you're telling us that this guy is a medic and he's a medic of not just a medic, but he's a medic of a search and rescue team, then I would guess that he would have an idea of dealing with pathogens and different diseases that you would come across if you're rescuing and searching and rescuing people, things that would endanger you, and it did just seem like he just walked in there like willy-nilly.
Bath Time here says, to be fair, Kane had a helmet on as well. Yeah, but that's why you
There
don't.
You go. That's
why you don't get mad at it. Like you know something's gonna happen, but it's believable. You don't sit there and go, that guy's stupid, so you tune out. You don't tune out because they have what looks to be, I mean, those radical spacesuits look like samurai armor. You didn't think anything was gonna get through that helmet.
Sure.
So it made sense that he's looking in and remember, whenever you've seen an egg open, we've seen, like, if you open an egg where there's a chick, still alive in there, we already know that. How dangerous can an egg be? So there, until you've seen Alien, you're like, it's an egg.
But he just had an encounter with a xenomorph, and up to this point, every single creature has been like.
But I mean, in the first Alien.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Fair. Gotcha.
After that, he's had all these crazy encounters. It's like, we got to understand that this is a ship carrying specimens of the most dangerous creatures we could possibly find throughout the universe. All of them are bad.
For sure.
There's nothing good here.
But all that being said, the creatures are really cool. I like what they're able to do. I like what they've teased so far. I'm very curious to see what our plant creature is able to do. Hopefully, I'm assuming we'll get more insight of what it's capable of going forward. With some of our other creatures that we have seen, are there other aspects of their life cycle that make things interesting? I mean, particularly with this tick creature that can, basically relieve you of all your blood like a Capri Sun. So I don't know, like who knows? Maybe it has another stage that we have yet to see. It would be interesting. And I mean, there were some other nice elements as well. It's cool to see, Noah Hawley as well. I know he cameoed. For those that aren't aware, he cameoed as Hermit and Wendy's late father. So I guess he's canon into the Alien Earth show. But in you giving, from what I can gather, and you saying 8 out of 10 being 4 out of 5 cats, I'm gonna have to give it like 3.5 out of 5, just based off of like just the rant that I had just with the medic and our characters. Where
no, that makes sense.
I just can't, like, especially after, like I said, with Romulus, where we're provided circumstances where we're able to buy what is happening. And as cool as the creatures are, as much as you said, as much as I love the characters, the production values are like incredible, very cinematic. Yeah, hopefully going forward, we're able to explore more of what you had mentioned in the past of us discontinuing human beings studying these aliens and instead having non-biological studying the aliens.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because I mean, I feel like there's enough there where you can explore that, where they basically can make the xenomorphs their pets essentially, and they turn on human beings and use the xenomorphs as their weapons. So just as we kind of get teased with brain fart and gosh with David thus far in the prequel. So but that is going to do it for this premiere episode. Robert, thank you so much. Thanks super appreciate it. Thank you for joining us 2 weeks in a row.
Hey, really, this has been a lot of fun. I mean, look, at least with Dexter now, we're getting interesting shows that are thought-provoking, and they might not be perfect, but they're definitely worth our time, as opposed to, say, something like Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which isn't worth anybody's time.
Ooh,
that's just me.
Fighting words.
But yeah, at least I'm interested in this. At least the people that are writing it have a brain in their heads.
For sure.
So that's
for sure. So with that being said, I'll punt it over to you. Can you tell folks, as always, the way I wrap up the show, where they can find you?
Well, if you don't hate my guts after my opinions on modern Star Trek, you can find me over on YouTube on my channel, The BURNETTWORK, and find me on my show, Robservations. I'm going to do one in an hour about Superman, and then we'll do another one later tonight, Midnight Metal with Dave Parker, and then I go on Let's Get Physical Media, our Sunday show that's on at 9. Pardon me, it's not on 9. It's on at 11 a.m. Pacific time on Sundays. So find me there, or on the John Campea show every weekday at 11 a.m. Pacific time.
Of course. So again, I want to thank Rob for joining us in dissecting these first 2 episodes of Alien Earth. It's going to be a busy couple of weeks because we're going to have a double header for you guys between Alien and Dexter for the next couple of weeks. So I hope you guys appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoy. But I'm your host again, Brandon Choi, co-creator of Movers and Shakers Unlimited. You can find me at Brandon Choi ENT on X and Brandon Choi _ENT on Instagram. That out of the way, thank you guys so much for watching. Be safe out there, and see you guys soon. Bye now.